Today we're taking a look at the Columbus Blue Jackets situation. Looks as though Pierre Luc Dubois might not be the only player feeling some frustration already. The Leafs and Freddie Anderson, is there some frustration building there as well? Looks like Keith Yandle's Ironman streak might be able to stay intact. And we have some other updates as well, including some waivers and a fine. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to take a look at here today. First up, we have our first fine of the season. There was a hearing with NHL player safety a little bit earlier today with Pittsburgh Penguins forward Jared McCann, who was being looked into for an elbowing incident against Flyers defenseman Travis Sanheim. Now, there was some potential there for suspension, but they have settled on a $10,000 fine, which is the maximum allowed under the CBA. In my opinion, this was a pretty flagrant, somewhat stupid elbow from McCann. As he went into the corner, you could see the arm go out. Like, I don't know, it was kind of an irresponsible play. I'm not really sure what McCann was thinking. He definitely deserves some sort of discipline for it. I don't think it was egregious to the point that a suspension was justified, but certainly at least a fine here was justified for sure. Kind of a dumb play, in my opinion, from McCann and the Penguins, who have had their tough time to start the year with the Flyers. Now, another quick note on the Flyers before we move on here as well is they will be without one of their top center icemen, Sean Couturier, who's got an injured shoulder. Looks like it's a mild separation by the looks of it. He's going to be out of action for around 2 weeks or so. So that's certainly a big blow to a Flyers team that's off to a pretty good start. Obviously, we'll see how they compare against some other teams. So far against Pittsburgh, they've looked good, looked strong. But Couturier is a big part of that. Certainly one of the better two-way centers in the NHL. So to lose him is substantial, and we'll see how they fare here in the next couple of weeks without him in their lineup. Now, a couple other quick notes as well. The Edmonton Oilers, of course, as we know, has been kind of searching for some answers when it comes to goaltending depth after they've learned that goaltender Mike Smith, who has yet to make an appearance this season, will be out of the lineup for a number of weeks now. It looks as though originally they were saying maybe a week or two, but they did put him on long-term injury reserve. So there's like a 4-week span there where he's going to be unavailable. So they placed him on long-term injury reserve, and they've gone ahead and made a waiver claim, which I'm a little surprised they didn't make one the other day when Alex Nedeljkovic of Carolina was available after they lost Forsberg. They had an opportunity to kind of take the goalie back from Carolina and chose not to, which he's a good goalie, so I'm surprised they didn't. But they had claimed Troy Grosnick off waivers from the Los Angeles Kings, so he had been playing the role of backup to Jonathan Quick as Cal Peterson wasn't ready to start the season. He was out, so once Peterson was ready to come back, they had put him on waivers to put him on the taxi squad, and the Oilers claimed him. So obviously he'll have to go through some protocols given the fact he's coming from Los Angeles. So he won't be available for a little while, but based on the Oilers' schedule, it looks as though they were kind of thinking, a few weeks down the road as well. They do have Stuart Skinner that they're, able to put in there, but of course he's, not that far out of junior, doesn't really have any experience. They'll probably be very hesitant to play him. So we'll see if he gets any action before Grosnick can actually get in there. He's 31 years old. Really very, very, very limited NHL action, though. He's been a decent American Hockey League goaltender, but certainly a little older, a little more mature. And even though he doesn't have a ton of NHL experience, at least he's got more pro hockey experience. It will certainly add to their depth over time here. I would not be surprised if the Oilers do continue to look for an upgrade in that area as the season moves along, though, to have a little bit more solid number 3 guy in their lineup. And they really banked on having Forsberg and lost out on waivers. Another note here as well, the Islanders forward Josh Hosang finally knows what he's doing. He's been loaned to a Swedish Hockey League team, and he'll be spending the entire season over there. The team he's going to also has another Islanders prospect, so I'm not really sure the Islanders really care too much to keep too close of an eye on him, to be honest. He is going to only on a 1-year deal with the Islanders, so he'll be a restricted free agent again, but they don't have to tender him a qualifying offer. He could become a UFA. I would assume that'll be what happens next offseason, and we'll see if he gets an opportunity or anything with any other NHL clubs. I'm assuming he might have to play over in Europe for a while to kind of prove himself as worthy of an NHL shot. Difficult to say, but clearly the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello are not pleased enough to to have any kind of future with him. I mean, he wasn't even invited to camp to really show what he was able to do. So obviously he's not in their plans whatsoever, but at least he's got a place to play for this season. Now, as I mentioned as well, there's a few situations I want to take a look at around the league that could lead to some trade talk. I mean, obviously we know in Columbus that Pierre Luc Dubois has made it known he wants to be traded. I did see another connection for the team that he may want to go to as well today besides Montreal. I know that was the big talk here in the last couple of days that NHL insiders were saying there was information suggesting that was his primary place he wanted to be traded to. But I want to touch on another situation involving Max Domi as well. Not to say that Max Domi is in the trade rumor mill or being traded. He just arrived in Columbus. I don't see that being a situation, but I just kind of want to bring it together with the Dubois situation because I think one of the big things for him, and of course I'm kind of making assumptions here because obviously Dubois has not said a lot publicly, and I don't imagine he will, as long as he's there at least. I mean, it's not going to make the situation worse. He's not going to do anything to do that. But, obviously we saw what things can be like with Tortorella. We know anybody who's followed hockey for any period of time, John Tortorella is a very fiery coach, and if you make the wrong move or you upset him, he's going to berate you, and he's not afraid to do it on the bench in front of the cameras, does not care, he'll call you out in the media. He's not afraid to be in your face kind of coach. Some guys can work and thrive on that, and other guys drives them up the wall. And even if you can handle that, I do think it's fair to say that he's the kind of coach that kind of has a shorter shelf life, that over time you kind of do get tired of it, and he kind of wears on you. And, maybe Dubois is at a point where he's like, I'm just done with it. I don't know. That's just, part of it, I think is fair to say. We saw it in the bubble and in the Toronto series especially. There was one incident where he was really ripping him on the bench, and it's not easy to deal with depending on what kind of player you are and what kind of way you feel like you respond best to feedback. But we already saw situations, the season's so young, and Max Domi was already in a situation where he was benched, and you got to think he's already probably feeling some frustration as well, and maybe there's a common denominator here. We've seen, look at the mass exodus out of Columbus before all of this. The last year or two, like we saw Bobrovsky, Panarin, they two longtime players there up and left. You had a situation where they brought in a bunch of players at the deadline, like Matt Duchene, Ryan Dzingel. They all left. I don't really think any of them really overly enjoy playing for John Tortorella, and I can't help but wonder if we might be a situation where GM Jarmo Kekalainen is going to have to really step back and say, okay, maybe the issue here is the coach. I mean, it's easier to replace a coach than it is to continuously be trading out your star players, and maybe that'll be his only opportunity, and I can't say for sure that it is or not, to kind of mend fences and have any chance of keeping Dubois. However, going back to some of Dubois' former teammates that have left, there is other reports that I've seen, and I guess we'll only see over time here, that one of his preferred destinations as well would be the New York Rangers, another team he'd be quite happily to be traded to, where he can hopefully play with his old line mate and friend Artemi Panarin. Now, of course, we know that Dubois had an opportunity to play some big-time minutes, including with Panarin on his wing, which has certainly played a role, and I think in his development, and certainly how his offensive prowess have kind of continued to grow here over the past couple of years. Certainly, Panarin's been gone, and he's continued to do that. So it's not like, a case of Panarin carrying him. I know early on there was some talk about Dubois' status, and that, maybe if he was on another team, maybe they wouldn't have that chance to be a top-line center, and obviously playing with a guy like Panarin or Atkinson is kind of, padding his stats a little bit. But, really, if you look at the last couple of years, his numbers are pretty consistent regardless of who he's played with. So I'm not really sure that's fair. But certainly the Rangers connection, we've heard the Rangers before. It's not the first time we've mentioned it, but it's certainly an opportunity there that obviously for him that he would widely accept is what's being reported. So we'll see what there is for truth to that. We know the Rangers had a really rough start. The first game against the Islanders did not go well at all. They ended up getting shut out. A lot of things went poorly. I know in the second game, which is supposed to go later tonight, they're making some changes to their lineup. Tony DeAngelo had a really bad game, got completely embarrassed again by Matthew Barzal. Defensively, we know Tony D is not the strongest, so I honestly think between what he says on social media, like just his mouth and getting himself in trouble, and his play, I really think that there's a good chance that he could find himself shipped out here at some point. We already know the future of Ryan Strome is uncertain as well. If they were going to bring in a guy like Dubois, clearly that would be a player they would be willing to include, maybe even a Filipino. One of the two would have to likely go. I know the Jackets would be pushing for a Kakko or Lafreniere, but there's just no way that the Rangers are going to be able to give up one of those players to bring in Dubois. I know that I can say for certain that I have get the information from enough sources. The Rangers are certainly involved in the mix here. Hard to say how hard they're pushing right now because I think everybody's being patient. So I don't necessarily think the deal's going to happen like super quick. But can you see a scenario looking at guys like Filipino, Ryan Strome, Tony DeAngelo, and some of the other prospects that are up and coming in the organization here that very well could find themselves in a situation where they could pull off this kind of trade. I mean, another guy who was really had a strong camp and surprised a little bit and pushed for a roster spot on opening night was K-Andre Miller. That's another guy who could maybe justify moving out Tony D. Like I said before, I don't see DeAngelo being better than like the fourth or fifth best defenseman on the team, and where he's at now with his payroll, I just don't see how they can justify that. So we'll see what happens, but the Dubois to the Rangers is an interesting scenario to go back and play with Panarin. And obviously the connection there as well with John Davidson from Columbus. And we know that Davidson certainly played a role in Panarin going to New York. I mean, when the everything kind of first started, we knew that Davidson wasn't in New York, but by the time free agency hit and the signings were able to happen, he was. And there was certainly some influence there. There were other teams, especially like in Florida, the Panthers and the Avalanche especially were pushing hard too. And they were in the mix, but Davidson used his influence to get him to go to New York with obviously a nice hefty salary as well. But he certainly played a role in all that as well. So we'll see what happens. But, we've got Max Domi, a game or two into his career, is already facing what Tortorella dishes out. Dubois feeling it as well. Maybe Torts is more of the problem than the players want to admit publicly, which is not a huge surprise. Now, I've seen a lot of comments talking about Freddie Andersen on social media today. Of course, we saw the opening game for the Ottawa Senators last night, which was the second game for the Maple Leafs. We saw the Sens beat the Leafs last night 5-3, and Freddie Andersen seemed to be getting a lot of the blame. There's already word that he's not dressing tonight, which is not a huge surprise given the schedule. Not so much the performance, but even the schedule alone is a factor there. But I see a lot of people talking, maybe the Leafs are going to get rid of Freddie Andersen. He's having another slow start. And I really don't think there's any chance that's going to happen. But I will say this. We know that Freddie Andersen is notorious for starting the season slow. But I really don't think he can be blamed for a lot of the goals he's let in so far. He's played the first two games of the season. They had a 5-4 victory in overtime against the Montreal Canadiens, and then a 5-3 loss in regulation against the Senators. So he's given up 9 goals in 2 games. That's not a great result by any means. But if you look back at the actual goals, a lot of the defensive coverage is really the fault here. Now, there's probably 2, maybe 3 at most. So you could say, Freddie probably should have had that. And that's part of the problem with these slow starts, is that even though he might not have been absolutely horrendous, but at the same time, he just wasn't coming up with that extra big save or that miraculous save at the right time to kind of keep his team in it and give them a chance to win. And that's just how things went against Ottawa last night. They gave up 3 goals in around 5 minutes' time. I mean, it just wasn't good. TJ Brody was absolutely garbage last night. I think that's fair to say. Hopefully, for the Leafs' sake, he can bounce back and play better than that, because that's certainly not the kind of defender they thought they were getting when he was signed to a free agent contract. And if he's been playing big minutes with Morgan Riley, that's if he can't do better than that, then that's going to be a major issue for them. I'd be curious to see when Mikko Lehtinen gets in the lineup as well. Sounds like they're going to give Robertson a chance to come in tonight for Barabanov. But I think that might be the only lineup change that we're seeing besides goaltending. So Freddie Andersen is sitting out tonight, not even dressing. They're going with Campbell at the start, and Aaron Dell will back up. But I think this was probably part of the plan on certain back-to-backs where they could get Freddie to just completely give them the whole night off, not even having to dress and sit on the bench. So I don't think that his play is a part of that. Now, obviously, his future with Toronto, there is some uncertainty. There's no doubt. I will be quite surprised given the dynamics of the season if the Leafs were able to pull off a trade doing a goaltender upgrade this year, though. I really don't see the scenario, at least at this time, where that would be very likely. But his slow starts, given the shortened season, are going to be that much more important. And if he can't get it together and really, play better back there, that's going to be an issue. And we might see potential goaltending situation that could become complicated if Campbell plays well. Like if the Leafs play with Campbell tonight, and let's say they win and he does really well, that's going to be tough to go back to Anderson right away. And, over time, we'll see how it goes. But, I don't think there's any danger of him being traded anytime soon, even though I saw a lot of Leaf fans on social media kind of calling for it after the slow start here yet again. But I think the Leafs are frustrated with it as well, but something they're just going to have to deal with for right now. I think a lot of their problems last night could be a lot to do with some better coaching, better player management. You had Matthews and Marner playing way too much. Why have a guy like Barabanov on the bench if he's only going to play like 4 minutes or something like that? Maybe spread things out a little bit. Maybe change things up when they're not working. I expect a completely different effort out of Toronto tonight. It would not be shocked if they pull out a victory and show what they're really made of. As much as the Senators had a good game, I just think a lot of it, more of that was about how the Leafs had a bad game. And we'll see how much that carries on from the next game going forward. There is some talk as well that Keith Yandle's Ironman streak might actually continue. Saw comments from Joel Quenneville after their morning skate today indicating that he tried Yandle with the main group on the power play and he liked how it looked a lot better. Suddenly, things are starting to change the tune here a little bit. Yandle's agent has gone public to say that he feels that this has nothing to do with performance and that they want to trade him and that they're trying to put pressure on him to give them more teams to work with to waive his no-move clause. And that's it for him. That's what he's saying, how it is. Apparently there was a meeting earlier as well with Yandle, the coaching staff, including GM Bill Zito. And maybe things are kind of changing here a little bit. But can you imagine the Florida Panthers? Like I said before, I understand Yandle from a defensive deficiency standpoint why some fans get frustrated with him. But you don't have anybody else there really that can run that power play. And, shocker, Keith Yandle makes your power play better in South Florida. Come on. I can't believe that they're even having these conversations. He's an Iron Man streak for a reason. He's a guy who's willing to give everything he's got and playing through a lot of pain. You don't play that many consecutive games without dealing with a lot of pain and being a great team player because of it. So hopefully he gets to keep that intact and they can find a way to settle this and get him traded so that he can carry on somewhere else with somebody that actually, values having him on her team for what he can actually bring in that value. So let me know what your thoughts on what we discussed here today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.